Have you ever wondered what secrets lie behind the doors of those we pass by every day? What if I told you that sometimes, the truth is more extraordinary than any fiction? This is the story of a millionaire whose perfectly constructed world collapsed in a single moment when a housekeeper uttered 7 simple words, "Sir, that boy lives in my house." If you're ready for a journey that will touch your heart and perhaps change how you see the world around you, stay with me until the end. And if this story moves you as much as it moved me, please consider liking this video and subscribing to our channel for more life-changing stories that remind us of our shared humanity. Alexander Reeves stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse office, surveying the city that had made him a fortune. At 45, he had everything money could buy: a real estate empire spanning 3 continents, a collection of luxury cars that would make enthusiasts weep, and a reputation as one of the most ruthless businessmen in the country. What he didn't have was someone to share it with. His marriage had ended a decade ago, childless and cold, like most of his relationships. The intercom on his desk buzzed. "Mr. Reeves, your 2 o'clock is here." "Mrs. Hernandez from the cleaning service." Alexander sighed. He'd been dreading this meeting. The woman had been requesting it for weeks, and he'd finally relented, assuming she wanted to negotiate a raise or complain about working conditions. He straightened his custom Italian suit and returned to his desk. "Send her in," he said, his voice clipped and professional. Elena Hernandez entered the office with hesitant steps. She was in her early 40s, with streaks of gray in her dark hair and hands roughened by years of labor. Alexander had seen her countless times over the past 5 years as she cleaned his offices, yet he realized he'd never really looked at her until now. "Thank you for seeing me, Mr. Reeves," she said, her accent thick but her English clear. "Mrs. Hernandez, I understand you've been quite persistent about this meeting. What can I do for you?" Alexander remained standing, hoping to keep the meeting brief. Elena clutched her purse tightly. "It's about the scholarship program your company runs for underprivileged children." Alexander nodded impatiently. The program was his late mother's legacy, one he maintained more out of obligation than passion. "What about it?" "My son, Miguel," he applied. "He's very smart, top of his class. He wants to study engineering." Alexander's jaw tightened. Was this why she'd been so insistent? To pressure him into favoring her son? "Mrs. Hernandez, the selection process is completely impartial. I don't interfere." "No, no," she interrupted, surprising him. "I'm not asking for special treatment. I just..." She took a deep breath. "I wanted to tell you something about Miguel. Something important." There was something in her eyes that made Alexander pause. He gestured to the chair across from his desk. "Please, sit down." Elena perched on the edge of the seat, still clutching her purse like a lifeline. "Miguel is 17 now. For years, he's been asking about his father. I always told him his father died before he was born." Alexander felt a flicker of impatience. What did this have to do with him? "Mrs. Hernandez." "Sir, that boy lives in my house," she said suddenly, her voice trembling. "But he is not just my son." Alexander stared at her, confused. "He is your son too." The words hung in the air between them, impossible and yet somehow not entirely surprising. Alexander felt as though the floor beneath him had suddenly disappeared. That's impossible," he managed to say, though even as the words left his mouth, his mind was racing back through time. Elena reached into her purse and pulled out a photograph. "This is Miguel at his 16th birthday." Alexander took the photo with numb fingers. The boy in the image had his eyes, the same unusual shade of gray that Alexander had inherited from his own father. The shape of the jaw, the set of the shoulders, it was like looking at his younger self, only with darker hair. "How?" he whispered. "Do you remember the charity gala your company hosted in Miami, almost 18 years ago?" Alexander's mind flashed back. He'd been 27 then, newly wealthy and reckless with his success. There had been a woman, beautiful, intelligent, working as part of the catering staff. They'd spent a weekend together, and then he'd returned to his life without a backward glance. "You were Elena Diaz then," he said slowly, the memories crystallizing. She nodded. "I found out I was pregnant a month later. I tried to contact you, but your assistant said you were not interested in speaking with me. I was young and scared, so I moved away, changed my name slightly, and raised Miguel on my own. But why now? After all these years?" Alexander's voice had lost its usual commanding tone. "I never planned to tell you. I made a good life for us. But then Miguel saw the scholarship announcement with your name and picture. He remarked how much you looked like him." Elena's eyes filled with tears. "He doesn't know. I haven't told him who you are. But when I saw how desperately he wants to go to college, how hard he's worked, I thought you should know. Not for money, we've managed all these years, but because he deserves the chance to know his father." Alexander sat heavily in his chair, the photograph still in his hand. His mind was a storm of emotions, disbelief, anger, confusion, and something else he couldn't quite name. "I need proof," he said finally, his business instincts taking over. "A DNA test." Elena nodded. "I expected that. Miguel and I will do whatever tests you require." The DNA results came back a week later, confirming what Alexander had already begun to accept in his heart. Miguel Hernandez was, without question, his biological son. The knowledge shattered everything Alexander thought he knew about his life and himself. He arranged to meet Miguel at a quiet restaurant, not as his father but as the head of the scholarship committee. Elena had agreed to let Alexander decide when and how to reveal the truth. Miguel arrived precisely on time, dressed in a carefully pressed shirt that was slightly too big for his lanky frame. Alexander watched from across the restaurant as the boy entered, scanning the room with those familiar gray eyes. The resemblance was undeniable, and Alexander felt a strange tightening in his chest. "Mr. Reeves? I'm Miguel Hernandez." The boy extended his hand with a confidence that belied his obvious nervousness. Alexander stood and shook his son's hand for the first time. "Please, sit down, Miguel. Thank you for meeting with me." Over the next hour, Alexander learned about the son he never knew he had. Miguel was indeed brilliant, passionate about sustainable engineering, determined to create affordable housing solutions for low-income communities. He worked part-time at a local hardware store, volunteered teaching math to younger kids, and helped his mother with her cleaning business on weekends. "My mom works for your company," Miguel said with a hint of pride. "She's always said that hard work and education are the keys to a better life." "Your mother sounds like a wise woman," Alexander replied, his throat tight with emotion. "She's the best," Miguel said simply. "It's been just the two of us my whole life, but she never made me feel like I was missing anything." "But you were," Alexander thought. "You were missing me, and I was missing you." As the meal progressed, Alexander found himself increasingly impressed by this young man who shared his blood but none of his cynicism or hardened worldview. Miguel spoke of his dreams with an earnestness that Alexander had long ago abandoned in his pursuit of wealth and power. "May I ask you something, Mr. Reeves?" Miguel said as they finished their dessert. "Of course. Why did you want to meet me?" "I mean, there must be hundreds of applicants for the scholarship." Alexander had prepared for this question, but now found himself struggling for words. "Your application stood out," he said finally. "And sometimes it's important to look beyond paperwork and numbers. To see the person behind the application." Miguel nodded thoughtfully. "My mom always says that too. That every person has a story worth knowing." "Your mother is right again," Alexander said, making a decision. "Miguel, there's something I need to tell you. Something important." But before he could continue, his phone rang, an emergency call from his executive team about a deal in Dubai that was falling apart. Alexander hesitated, torn between the business empire he'd built and the son he'd just found. For the first time in his career, Alexander Reeves silenced his phone without answering it. "Whatever it is, it can wait," he told Miguel. "This conversation is more important." The weeks that followed were a careful dance of revelation and reconciliation. Alexander told Miguel the truth about their relationship, weathering the boy's initial shock, anger, and confusion. Elena explained her reasons for keeping the secret, her tears flowing freely as she asked her son for forgiveness. For Alexander, the process of becoming a father to a nearly grown son was humbling and transformative. He had built skyscrapers and negotiated billion-dollar deals, but nothing had prepared him for the complexity of building a relationship with Miguel. The boy was understandably wary at first. "I don't need your money," he told Alexander bluntly during one of their early meetings. "And I don't need you to suddenly act like a father when you weren't there for 17 years. "You're right," Alexander had replied, respecting his son's honesty. "I can't make up for those years. But I'm here now, if you'll let me be." Slowly, cautiously, they began to forge a connection. Alexander attended Miguel's science competitions and soccer games. Miguel visited Alexander's office and showed a natural aptitude for understanding the business. They discovered shared interests in architecture, classic films, and spicy food, small threads of connection that gradually wove into something stronger. Elena watched their developing relationship with a mixture of joy and trepidation. One evening, as she and Alexander sat on her modest porch while Miguel studied inside, she voiced her fears. "I'm afraid you'll take him away from me," she admitted. "Give him a taste of your world that will make him ashamed of where he comes from." Alexander looked at the woman who had raised his son with such grace and strength. "Elena, you've given Miguel everything important: values, character, love. I could give him material things, yes, but they're meaningless compared to what you've already provided. I don't want to take him away from you. I just want the chance to be part of his life too." As Miguel's high school graduation approached, Alexander faced a reckoning with his own life choices. The empire he'd built suddenly seemed hollow when compared to the richness of the relationship he was building with his son. The ruthless business tactics that had made him wealthy now felt at odds with the values he wanted to model for Miguel. He began making changes, first small ones, then larger ones. He implemented ethical business practices that sometimes cut into profits but aligned better with his evolving conscience. He established a foundation focused on affordable housing and education, inspired by Miguel's passions. He reconnected with old friends and family members he'd neglected in his single-minded pursuit of success. On graduation day, Alexander sat beside Elena in the school auditorium, both of them bursting with pride as Miguel delivered the valedictorian address. "We often think success means climbing to the top alone," Miguel said, his confident voice carrying through the hall. "But I've learned that true success is about who climbs with you and who you reach back to help along the way." Alexander felt tears sting his eyes as he recognized his own son's wisdom that had come not from him, but from Elena and from Miguel's own innate goodness. After the ceremony, as they posed for photos, Miguel in his cap and gown, flanked by his mother and newly found father, a reporter from the local paper approached. "Mr. Reeves, quite a surprise to see you at a high school graduation. Is this part of your company's scholarship program?" Alexander looked at Miguel, seeking permission with his eyes. When his son nodded, Alexander placed a hand on Miguel's shoulder. "I'm here as a father," he said simply. "This is my son, Miguel." The story broke the next day. Billionaire Alexander Reeves discovers teenage son raised by company housekeeper. The media frenzy was intense, with reporters camping outside Elena's modest home and Alexander's luxury penthouse, hungry for details of the sensational story. Alexander hired security to protect Elena and Miguel's privacy and issued a simple statement: 17 years ago, I missed the opportunity to be a father. I'm grateful for the chance to know my son now, and for Elena Hernandez's extraordinary grace in raising him to be the remarkable young man he is today. We ask for privacy as our family navigates this new chapter. Family. The word felt foreign yet right on Alexander's tongue. As the media attention gradually subsided, the three of them settled into a new normal. Miguel accepted both the scholarship from Alexander's foundation and his birthright, but with conditions that reflected his character. He would work in the company from the ground up during summers, learning every aspect of the business. He would continue to live primarily with his mother while attending university. And a significant portion of any inheritance would go toward expanding programs for affordable housing and education. "I don't want anything handed to me," he told Alexander firmly. "I want to earn my place in both worlds." Alexander couldn't have been prouder of his son's integrity, a quality he recognized had come from Elena's influence. 5 years later, Alexander stood at those same floor-to-ceiling windows in his office, but everything else had changed. The company now operated with a social conscience that balanced profit with purpose. Elena had accepted a position as director of the foundation, bringing her practical wisdom and compassion to its operations. And Miguel, now a graduate with dual degrees in engineering and business, was working alongside Alexander, bringing fresh perspectives and innovative ideas. But the most profound change was in Alexander himself. The man who had once measured his worth by the size of his bank account now found his greatest joy in Sunday dinners at Elena's house, in debates with his brilliant son, and in the knowledge that his legacy would be not just buildings of steel and glass, but a family built on forgiveness and second chances. As he turned from the window, Alexander saw Miguel entering his office, architectural plans tucked under his arm and that familiar determined gleam in his gray eyes, his eyes. "Ready for the presentation, Dad?" Miguel asked. The word still filled Alexander with wonder every time he heard it. "Ready," he replied, gathering his jacket. As they walked toward the conference room together, Alexander reflected on the strange and beautiful journey that had begun with 7 words from a courageous housekeeper: "Sir, that boy lives in my house." Those words had shattered the millionaire he once was, but from those broken pieces, Alexander Reeves had built something far more valuable than any fortune, a life rich with love, purpose, and the profound joy of being a father. If this story touched your heart, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. Remember that sometimes, the most precious treasures aren't found in bank vaults or penthouse suites, but in the unexpected connections that remind us what truly matters in this life. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and I'll see you in the next story.